Joining us now, our Canucks reporter, one half of the Rink Wide duo with Andrew Wadden. It's the one and only Jeff Paterson, the perfect guest on a day like today because of his total recall of every Canucks game that has ever happened over the last quarter century or so. Good afternoon, Jeff. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm recovering, I suppose. Like most, I feel like I've got a hangover after watching that thing last night. That was something else.
Okay, so you're the guy to ask. Bodog poll question. Is that the craziest Canucks game you've ever seen?
Canucks game, probably, although I was in Pittsburgh not that long ago, a couple of years back, the Travis Green era, when I was out traveling with the team, and the Penguins rallied with 5 in the third period to erase a 6-3 deficit and beat the Canucks 8-6, and that was something to behold that night. Evgeny Malkin just went off. He was completely unstoppable. It didn't matter what the Canucks tried to do, and that star power taking over a game, that wasn't really the case last night. That was all hands on deck. Everybody was getting in on the fun. I think back not that long ago as well, there was a 7-6 game in overtime. They beat Colorado, and Elias Paterson had 5 points, the first of his 2 5-point nights as a rookie, and so that was something else. I way back in the memory bank, and I was old enough to be around. I don't really recall it, but I remember seeing the box score of the 10-9 win over the Minnesota North Stars many, many years ago. And obviously it has to be many years ago because we're talking about the Minnesota North Stars.
Right.
But honestly, guys, when I think of the wildest hockey game that I've ever seen in person, back in my days calling junior hockey, there was a game over Christmas when the mighty Kamloops Blazers had a whole bunch of guys away at the World Junior, either selection camp or the tournament itself. And so they were a diminished roster, and they fell behind 6-0 on home ice to the Spokane Chiefs. Now, part of the problem that night was that their goalie was away at the World Junior camp, so they had their backup in net, but they had some kid that was called up from like midget or bantam that wasn't supposed to play. And so the coach's hands were tied. He couldn't really turn to this guy as a backup. He really was there truly as an emergency. Anyways, it was 6-0 after 1 for Spokane. It was 6-all after 2 periods.
No.
And then the Blazers ended up losing, I believe 8-7 was the final score in overtime. But yeah, I mean, just breathtaking stuff. You just don't expect to see that many twists and turns, and certainly when a team is that far down. And so when the Canucks were down the way they were at 4-0 and absolutely nothing going their way on the scoreboard, but it's crazy to think, like if somebody just looked at the box score and said, 4-0, what a brutal start, the Canucks easily could have been up 4-0 in that hockey game. And then, from there, really the twists and turns began.
Well, them going down late again at 5-4, that was perfect.
6-5.
6-5, pardon me. At that point, I'm thinking, this is so Canuck. Like, show the chutzpah to get back into it and then lose at the death. I mean, that to me, that was perfect. So credit to them for breaking the narrative on a couple of occasions, because they could have just said, well, we were spirited. We came back. At least we didn't get embarrassed tonight. But they didn't. They wanted the points.
Well, it's funny, guys. I mean, part of the story to this point of the season, the 26th game mark, is all of those flushed leads that they have squandered, and it's cost them. And yet 4 of their last 5 victories, they have trailed at some point in the third period and come back to win. And it's not an easy league to come back in, although this year it does seem a little easier than some. But, yeah, I mean, it's just been these ups and downs, and no lead is truly safe when the Vancouver Canucks are involved, and that was the case last night. And, when Höglander hit the post at 4-0, or the crossbar, and you just thought, all right, it's not happening. It's just not happening. That looked like a sitter. It was there for them. And then, Connor Garland, of all people, gets the comeback started. At 4-1, they had a little bit of life. At 4-2, though, I thought the 4-2 goal was really an important one, because I think at 4-2, there was belief. We know this team can score. They've done it all season. And so against a Montreal team that, backup goaltender, a young defense, a long way from home, body clocks, and all those types of things, at 4-2, I wasn't predicting a Canuck comeback, but I didn't rule it out either, only because we have seen this team score in bunches, and that's what they do. It's just that they give up in bunches as well. And so that third period was a wild ride. And we saw the Anaheim game here last month, 8-5. This one's 7-6. There have been 2 games on home ice already this season where the Canucks have surrendered 5 or more, and found a way to win. So they score. They can outscore their problems on a lot of nights, but man, it's a dangerous way to think that you can have success over the long haul, giving up as many as they do as well.
So our listeners are fantastic, and followers as well on social media who have inundated us with games like Calgary years ago when Gino got a match penalty for spearing, a 10-minute match penalty for spearing, the 7-minute 5-on-3 that Anaheim got years ago, Jeff, and I believe it was a 7-1 win for the Ducks.
Oh, I think it was 9-1.
9-1, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. We're reminded of the Canucks beat the Flames once, 11-0, as well as, and Gurminder and a few others with March 8th, 2004. Crazy for different reasons. But here's the thing. Not to mention that Carolina game in 2016, 8-6. 5-2 lead evaporates with 4 goals in 4 minutes. But this was a garden variety regular season game. It's lacking stakes. And we have had a few people message in. They thought the Slay the Dragon game was the craziest game. And boy, I haven't covered many like that. To see the equalizer scored shorthanded with the goalie out, potentially erasing a 3-0 series deficit. And then the 4 overtime game with Luongo and the 70-plus saves against Dallas as well.
Sure,
because they have stakes, right?
Yeah,
you have more eyeballs on
but
those.
if we're just talking, like, the goals, back in the 80s, like, teams scored, the Oilers used to come in routinely and score 11 and 12 and 13 on the Canucks. Like, this is a separate category. This was mood swings, it was comebacks, it was, just the sheer disbelief of, yes, there have been other games that have had, you walked away just shaking your head for different reasons. But I just think in terms of a standard, as you said, regular season game that you just didn't see coming. Look, we've seen the Canucks, they rolled over against both Florida and Washington earlier on the homestand. And at 4-0, I was thinking to myself, guys, and not trying to overstate it, at 4-0 Montreal, if it stayed that way or it got worse, I think this would have qualified as one of the most dispiriting homestands in the history of the Vancouver Canucks, coming off a 3-game win streak out on the road, thinking they could get some traction, and then seeing what happened to Florida, or against Florida and against Washington, and holding up an overtime win against the Arizona Coyotes as some measure of success, and then have this happen. So, they changed the storyline, and I thought Elias Pettersson, this wasn't a night where somebody had 5 points or a hat trick. I mean, they did spread the wealth around, but man, I thought Paterson was good. Those 2 passes, the one to Mikheyev, particularly, they're both to Mikheyev, but the first one, it had to be a perfect pass, and it was just on his stick in traffic. The one across the crease was pretty spectacular as well. And
I was going to ask you, is he the William Wallace of this unlikely battle win here, or is he the one that let it cross the finish line?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for a hero, because ultimately he scores the winner in overtime too. But it was before that. I just thought we saw sort of his vision, his playmaking, all of that was on full display. And he's having a terrific season. He's up to 32 points now in 26 games. So we all kind of beat that drum at the start of the year that for Elias Pettersson to have a successful season on an individual basis, it was time for him to be a point-a-game guy. Well, he's almost a third of the way through the season now, and he's well ahead of that pace. So. There have been very few games, a couple of the ones earlier in the homestand here, where you could pick apart his overall performance on a given night. But really, it's been pretty consistent. He's been productive. And I liked an awful lot of what he did last night. And I liked that, Brock Boeser, I didn't like the penalty in the first period, obviously, but he did seem more engaged. And I think there is something to playing alongside his buddy and the best playmaker on this team. And, so I guess I'm not surprised that was sort of the reaction to all that went down over the weekend for Boeser. Anyways, fairly good team effort across the board, at least from the forward group. Again, defensively, this is who they are, I guess. You keep thinking they've got to address all of it. No, this is who they are. And I guess they're going to just try to outscore their issues. That's why I say it's a dangerous way to play. It's kind of fun when they are able to light up an opponent. And I think too, when I talked earlier about that Kamloops example, part of Marty St. Louis' problem last night was they're playing tonight in Seattle. Jake Allen really wasn't an option for him, right? It was ride or die with Sam Montembeault, who was incredible in the early going, but once the Canucks started to rack up goals in the third, he really couldn't turn to the other guy at the end of the bench because he knew that he needed Jake Allen for the second half of back-to-backs. So it didn't turn out to be a 4-goaltender special last night, only 3. And, we haven't even talked about Colin Delia, but, he obviously played a role in all of this for the Vancouver Canucks, sort of a surprising hero in the end to get the victory when he started the night on the bench.
We've seen this before from the Canucks, too. When they sink to the bottom of the league, they do face a lot of backup goaltenders. So we've seen a bit of a parade of that. And this is a soft part of the schedule, right? This was 3 games where, if the Canucks were going to keep any hopes alive, Arizona, Montreal, San Jose, like, my goodness, if they can go 3 for 3 there, that's feasting on the bottom of the league and the people around them here. That has to be underscored, though, who these wins would be against if they do get 3 wins in a row here.
Right, also, so it's set up for them there to go into San Jose, where they just won 10 days ago. Sharks are one of the worst home. They have 2 wins in 14 home games, which
really?
They've played a ton. Oof. And the only teams they've beaten, the Ontario teams. They haven't been able to schedule other opponents from Ontario. That's their problem. But their home ice wins have come against the Leafs and the Senators. But then it gets real. If the Canucks truly believe, okay, let's just say, for the sake of this argument, that they go into San Jose, they get a win, they get back to NHL 500, which when they were, 0 for 7 games in, to think that they could get back to 500 at the 27-game mark, some credit to them. But then it really gets real, because the 4 games after San Jose, and they can only play them one at a time here, but they get Minnesota, they get Calgary, they get St. Louis, they get Winnipeg, I think is in that order. Like, those are all the teams that they're right there in the soup with, right? And those are the games that they have to win. We talked a couple of weeks back about, they played so many Eastern teams, and even on this homestand, 3 of the 4, it starts to get real now. I think between now and the end of the calendar month, they play nothing but Western Conference opponents.
Yeah, so San Jose, a bit of a sitter on the 27th, but even after the 4 games you just mentioned, Seattle, Edmonton, there's the sitter against San Jose, and then Winnipeg, Calgary again. So you're right. After San Jose, 8 of the next 9 games are in the heat of the battle.
Yeah, and so I think by month's end, we'll have a much truer sense of, have they made strides? Are they in this thing? Or, again, 500 is not going to get them where they need to go in the short term, the long term. So they would have to have, I think, a month of December here to really kind of assert themselves and put themselves back into the mix. So all wins are good wins, especially when you're down 4-0. You take that. They'll try to take the positives out of it, certainly. But again, if you think that this was just a blip and, they gave up 6 and isn't that cute, they were able to win the hockey game, you haven't been paying attention. I mean, this is who they are defensively, and I think this is who they're going to remain defensively, especially, with a second and a third string goaltender now. And I imagine they go back to Spencer Martin and give him an opportunity to bounce back from what happened last night, but he wasn't very good, especially on that Suzuki goal. Like, that's a goal that at the NHL level, Suzuki's scoring a bunch, but you have to make that save. So goaltending will remain in the crosshairs for the Canucks here as long as Thatcher Demko is out. Spencer Martin's been incredible, and ultimately he's off the hook. He's not even the goaltender of note one way or the other, so that sort of gets expunged from his record, if you will, when it looked like he was going to take his worst loss in the National Hockey League. And we'll see if he can get back on the horse in San Jose.
Well, I can understand why we look at the schedule here in December and ask questions like, can they stay in it? Minus Thatcher, do we realistically expect them to stay in it here?
Guys, it's mid-December, Matt. It's mid-December, and I can't remember ever seeing this for the Canucks because we've talked about the nice spell of goaltending they've had. It's mid-December almost. Mm-hmm. The save percentages of the 3 goalies of record now are .882, .892, and .883. I guess it's startling.
Well, and I tweeted out earlier today, just I was curious when I woke up this morning, compared to last year, like where is their goals against that? They are giving up a full goal plus per game this year over year. And I'm using all 82 games last year and the 26 that they've played, but they're on pace right now. They're giving up a full goal.
That's
Thatcher Demko was terrific last year and hid some of their warts, but you're just not going to win more than you lose when you're giving up 3.5, 3 point, whatever it is now, 8 some odd goals per hockey game. And you're right, without your number one guy who, has been part of the problem, let's be honest, but he's still your number one guy. And at some point you think that he was going to find his form again. So, yeah, I mean, it remains
and
a
yet
remarkably...
your record is better. It's just...
Yeah, because they've got 5 guys. They've got 5 scorers in the top 65 in the National Hockey League.
Mm-hmm.
There's 32 teams, and they've got 5 guys in the top 65. So, scoring at an outrageous rate, giving up at an outrageous rate. Last year they were bad and dull. This year they are bad and better, at least on the entertainment scale. They're a whole lot more fun. But you're not going to get, we're asking the question about craziest game ever because this thing is an outlier. You just don't get many games like we saw last night. Although in the same breath, I say that, and 2 weeks ago, Seattle and LA scored 4 more goals. 13 seemed outrageous, and Seattle and LA combined for 17 in a hockey game.
Just lastly for me on Boeser, Jeff, is this the year where the NHL and his skating pace or lack thereof has caught up to him on the defensive side of things and on the transition side of things? Because he was always a very good standstill shooter, right? And we talked about how he's not just a standstill shooter because he was decent offensively and he was decent defensively, but we wondered about his pace and whether that would be a problem in years forward. Is it just the ever-quickening NHL that has caught up to Brock this year as you watch the games and look at the fact that he doesn't have a whole lot of impact on games when he isn't in a shooting position in the offensive zone?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a huge element of that. That's been part of the problem. I know going into the game against Montreal, the Canucks have been outscored 22-11 at even strength with Brock Boeser on the ice. And so it's not even the low goal total that I think a lot of people look to. It's the defensive side, and it just hasn't been there. Now, part of that is earlier in the season, he was on the line with Bo Horvat and Tanner Pearson. Well, we know that Tanner Pearson's not the fleetest guy either, and Bo Horvat's not a playmaker, so there wasn't a whole lot happening there. And even Bo, defensively, he's not the most responsible guy. So that line wasn't really set up to be this great defensive force for the Vancouver Canucks. And then Boeser's found himself lower in the lineup with Sheldon Dries and whoever on the other side. And Dries has had some tough nights. I think of the night in Buffalo when he was on the ice for all 4 of the goals that the Sabres scored. And so, I think on his own, Brock Boeser, speed, getting back on the back check. Even last night, was it the 4-0 goal? If you go and watch the replay, Paterson and Boeser both a little late on the back check and a little confusion about who to take. And obviously, Michael Pezzetta, of all people, ends up scoring the goal there. But, it kind of feels like you have to insulate Brock Boeser. And maybe that's why Elias Pettersson, can jumpstart him offensively, but also most nights Elias Pettersson is so diligent defensively that he can offer a bit of a life raft in that regard. So I do kind of want to see whether it's for boosting the trade value or just boosting the spirits of Brock Boeser. I'd like to see a little bit of a run with Elias Pettersson here just to see what that looks like at both ends of the ice, to see if Brock Boeser can, get his numbers moving in the right direction, both offensively and defensively.
Agree wholeheartedly, Jeff. Marvelous stuff. Thank you for this, my friend. We will catch up with you on Thursday.
Yeah, I look forward to another 7-6 game in San Jose.
Please.
Could be.
Each and every night.
Literally could
Each
be.
and every night.
Yeah,
if they're not going to win a cup and they're probably not going to the playoffs, let's have more like last night, please.